in the sky. It's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's
your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Jake.
Mitch.
It is with a heart that I'm sure is heavier than yours that I come to this recording tonight.
I'm sure yours is heavier as well, but don't get me wrong. I am deeply saddened by our subject matter tonight.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things where I'm both frustrated and saddened, but I'm also very grateful at the same time. Like I'm a mixed bag of I'm in this glass case of emotion, and I know that I want to yell things and I want to feel things deeply, but I'm not sure that I'm doing them singularly. Like it's like that Daniel Tiger song for those fellow dads out there and moms, sometimes you feel two feelings at the same time, and that's okay. So that's basically been my theme song for the last 5 days as we wrestle with the news of Henry Cavill no longer being Superman.
Yeah, it is truly tragic. Let me rewind and say on Daniel Tiger, we love Daniel Tiger in my home, but we've not really been able to implement a lot of his songs because my son just uses those things as an excuse to make me sing for him. And so he'll turn around and be like, Daddy, what do I do when I'm angry? I'm like, stop it. All right. We're in the middle of Walmart. I don't want to do this right now.
So here's the thing is my daughter is the biggest Daniel Tiger super fan, at least in the small community that we live in, for sure. She was even put on the cover of the newspaper of our local town not too long ago when she went to the event where she got to meet Daniel Tiger at the library. The line wrapped around the building, but she was the one that they put on the front page of the newspaper because the person taking pictures was like, hey, I know you and I know you love Daniel Tiger. Snap, put you on the front.
Nice.
But anyway, my daughter loves to sing and dance to the Daniel Tiger songs. Like they give her motivation. They're like her Rocky montages. And she wants to run around the house dancing, singing the songs. And sometimes we use them as teaching moments and everything. So basically what I hear is this: your son uses them as a sinister ploy to get some sort of jovial enjoyment out of your displeasure. And my daughter legitimately uses them as fuel for her day and her worldview. So you're Luthor and I'm raising Supergirl. Is that what?
I'm going to be honest, though. I, as a child, once staged a fight with my brother to get my mom to get us a reward for making up. So, like, it doesn't – because my mom would do that thing where she'd be like, oh, I'm just so happy to see you guys getting along. Let's go to the video store. Whatever. I don't know what I was trying to get out of her. But so I realized I was like,
Mom, your mom is too sweet for that. You got to stop that, Jake.
Oh,
hearing it's okay to give it a break.
I'll get there. We're working through it. The family counseling helps, but no, I'm really sad about this topic. I think that, and I said this in a tweet. I realize sometimes I look back at my Twitter and I'm like, boy, I really reacted to that as if somebody passed away. But I was really dramatic about it. But I was like, here's the thing. There have been issues in my mind. I have had problems with some of the Snyder take on the DC universe. And I have felt that the critics are too hard on it, but the fans are too easy on it. So I've tried to fall in the middle where I'm critical, but also forgiving. At no point have I felt that Henry Cavill was the problem or a problem. And, any issues I might have had with those films had nothing to do with his interpretation of the character. And I get that, this is a casualty of DC. I feel like we have accidentally become this like ongoing study on our podcast of DC's cinematic issues, and Warner Brothers' inability to take the most lucrative franchises on earth and make something useful out of them. And we've just discussed it so much. And I feel like this is just one more casualty of that because DC just doesn't really have their ducks, or not DC really, but Warner Brothers doesn't have their ducks in a row on things. Yeah. Because I don't want to point the finger at DC necessarily. It's the parent company, and Warner Brothers just is, whether you like or don't like their movies, that's not my point. It's just you can see there's so much, I almost want to say chaos, but at the very least disorganization around this expanded, extended universe that it's cost us Henry, and that is frustrating to me as a fan.
It is really frustrating for a myriad of reasons. I'll touch on two really quickly, and we'll dive into why we're actually here. First of all, can I just say that he may have been, like, maybe I don't want to definitively, like, arguably, he may have been the most perfect casting of a actress with a superhero. Like, and I mean it in this way, again, like you said, it has nothing to do with Zack Snyder. It has nothing to do with the tone of the movies. It just has everything to do with the casting decision and how he embodied the character. And a couple of things that always stood out about me with Cavill's interpretation of Kal-El is he completely filled the screen and captured a sense of energy and magnetism that is unlike anything else I have ever seen in a blockbuster movie. Like, you are just drawn to him in different ways as you experience him emoting differently throughout the movie. He found that balance between, can I bring majesty and glory to the icon, to the myth, but also can I find deeply rooted humanity as we explore these different avenues of Superman that we haven't put on screen before. And he did it perfectly, while still, when he would step on screen in that suit, it was like a Tom Cruise moment. He just looked like a movie star, and you're like, yes, I will stare at you. And this is nothing sexual. It's just, I will stare at you because I am drawn to you. And I think it was after Man of Steel had been announced that it was coming, and maybe even after the first teaser trailer had been released, but it hadn't been released at theaters yet. I was watching an interview with Kevin Smith, I believe. I could be wrong. Go to YouTube and fact check me, people. But Kevin Smith, I think, was on set for shooting for a couple of days as like a consultant or something on the script or whatever. Anyway, he was there, and I think he was there for maybe some of the test shoots. And he described this perfectly, where he said he was there. He hadn't seen Henry in the suit yet. He hadn't seen anybody. He just met with Zach and met with a couple of the people that were heading up the movie. And then he was on set, and he was waiting. Everyone was waiting for Henry to come out to do some shooting. And like, Henry, it was like the first day he was going to put on the suit, I believe. And he walked onto the set, and Kevin Smith said, everybody just stopped, and there was this fixed silence there. And I just got the sense that everybody was thinking the same thing I was thinking, which is, holy crap, that guy is Superman. Like, I don't know if there's a better way to capture just the energy and the magnetic visuals that he captured with that character other than his summation of that. And the other thing is too, is just personally, I mean, we've made it very clear on this podcast that Superman is my guy, and I'm a relatively young individual. The Man of Steel was the first legitimate Superman movie I was able to see in theaters, because Superman Returns we don't recognize. And so, for a lot of biased reasons, but also because it's still a fairly well-made movie. Man of Steel, if you're asking for just my personal, like, emotional attachment favorites of comic book movies, Man of Steel is going to be in my top 5. It just is. And so I look and see that in this DC extended universe, we got one really good Superman movie, and then we got, 2 more installments where he's in partial bits of the movie. I feel like I'm a little bit robbed, especially since the casting was so perfect.
Yeah, and I think that, this is where I want to say this as like just kind of a respect thing to the fact that there was a lot about, not a lot, but the way to say this, I guess, is there's 2 major branches on how you can interpret Superman, and Zack Snyder, and through him, Henry Cavill. Is it Cavill or Cavill? I'm embarrassing myself, but
I think it's Cavill. He's
Cavill. Okay,
he's from
that's
Europe.
What I've said forever.
Yeah, so I think it's Cavill.
Henry, that take on
Henry and his chin.
I mean, that take on the character is the one that I typically don't prefer. And that's not to say it's a bad take, and it's certainly not to say it's the wrong one, but that way that leans into more the sci-fi alien elements of the character and emphasizes Krypton versus Smallville, that's not my favorite version of the character. However, my personal preference aside, I do believe that he took an interpretation that doesn't resonate with me usually, and made it very enthralling in the performance. He made it very believable, very accessible. And I've been the one, I've been one of those people that was like, boy, I just don't agree with killing Zod, and I get what they were going for, but I don't think it worked for me. And I said that, and yet that moment when he kills Zod is so well performed and it's so well delivered that it makes it harder for me to be critical of it. So I say all of that to say, I'm not trying to say these are the things I didn't like. I'm trying to say, in spite of those things, he made the performance a real standout thing for me. And I have crazy respect for that when you can do something that on paper I can look at and say, this is not my favorite, but then in practice I can look up there and watch it happen and say, yeah, this is okay. That might be one of the highest praises I can give to the guy. So I just say it to say, because I know you're listening, Henry, I enjoyed it, and thank you for the ride.
I completely agree. It would have been, we could play the what if game for forever, but it would have been wonderful to see how that alien immigrant standpoint of it played out if he was given a little bit more real estate to have the other side of the story then be played out with, how do I attach myself to Earth and feel one with these people? Because I think what you said is justifiable as far as your distaste for the Man of Steel take. I clearly didn't have a problem with it, but it's justifiable. And I almost feel like we feel that way because it was incomplete. I wish Man of Steel 2 would have been made before BVS, because then Man of Steel 2 would have given us the second half of that story where we would have had that entire emotional experience of watching this immigrant actually try to, build a home in this foreign land. Because basically the whole Man of Steel was basically just, okay, I'm an alien, I'm an immigrant, I'm new here, and now I have to come to terms with the fact that my homeland is coming back to haunt me. And so he laid that to rest, and then we don't have that other piece of him fitting in and carving it out, and that rich real estate of narrative that could be had right there. And then we just went straight into BVS, where he's only in half of the movie, and then he sacrifices himself, which is still a powerful moment, but how much more powerful could that moment have been had we had another chapter where we got to live in that moment of watching him build a home, build relationships, make his way in, struggle a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that I say this both to defend and criticize the Snyder series. I think what we were watching, and it never really became apparent until we were far enough in that everyone had kind of made their minds up about the series. But I think what we realized after a while we were watching was a very long developing origin story. And I think that the intention, and you can see this in interviews with the performers, with the creators, with all sides of the project, you can see that the killing of Zod, the sacrifice against Doomsday, these were all very calculated steps on the road to how did he become the Superman that everybody thinks of when they think Superman. I don't know that was super duper apparent to me the first time I sat down to watch Man of Steel. And part of that, I think, is the necessity in our current, in our media culture of trying to, you got to bury things deep. You don't want to spoil what's going to happen to Zod because that's a major moment. So you got to bury that deep, and you can't necessarily be talking about it. And you also got to trust your audience to understand your take. So there's a lot of reasons why I get that wasn't well communicated, but that doesn't change the fact that it colored the experience a little bit. I say all that to say, I do believe that there was a clearly charted out path in Zack Snyder's mind, at the very least, that was headed to, this is the story, all of these movies leading up to it, of how he became the character that everybody thinks he is.
For sure. And gosh, it's a muddled mess. I don't know what else to say. It's two things. It's a muddled mess, and I'm gonna miss Henry. Yeah, it was a good ride, as you said.
Man, I can agree with that. But tell the people why we are here tonight, Mitch.
Yeah, so preamble done. We are here to give a little bit of fan casting to who should replace Superman. Now, Jake, in our production meeting this week, I texted you and said, come up with 3 options, and I'll come up with 3, and we'll dish on that because that's probably going to be enough for us to fill a full episode.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't know what your kind of approach was. I ended up casting for different Superman story ideas because it was too large of an arena for me to be like, okay, if I've got all of Superman to pick from, what the heck am I going to narrow down to? So I just kind of picked like 3 specific storylines of Superman that I would love to see on screen and cast it for that. And so we'll kind of see how that goes. But before we do that, let's touch on a clear omission that we have that we are going to get hammered for if we don't address it right out of the gate. So who did you and I both leave off of our lists? And it's not because we're hateful people. We have reasons for it. Why? Who did we leave off our list?
So the reason why I actually was, even before I saw the rumors swirling, I was thinking about putting Michael B. Jordan on my list. I've made no secret of how much I really enjoyed his performance in Black Panther. I really enjoyed him in Creed. I really just think he's a very talented guy. And I think that, here's the thing. If you cast him, and this isn't why, the reason I went away from him as a choice is actually because it was getting so much internet buzz and I didn't want to be derivative, but I thought we could address it in this way.
It's like, I feel like it's absolutely everywhere and we wouldn't have anything new to bring to the conversation.
And that's all it is. So if anyone out there is a really big proponent of that, I actually don't hate the idea. I liked it enough. He was on my short list as I was narrowing it down. What I ended up deciding is it was very derivative. I wasn't going to bring anything new. The thing I think the decision, and this is not, I'm trying to tread a very fine line here because I think that I don't want this to become that episode. What I do want to say is if he gets cast in that role, it's not, he might not be trying to make a statement. The people casting him might not be trying to make a statement. There is a certain element of society that's going to, there's a couple elements that are going to see it and hear it as a statement. That's not necessarily a bad thing, and it's certainly not a reason to not do it. It is simply a consideration that needs to be made. His take on the character would have to be informed by that, right? Like you can't, and I guess what I'm trying to say as the whitest guy on a show with 2 white guys is what I'm trying to say is that you can't have a black Superman and not acknowledge it, I guess, and I don't mean that like that has to be all the character is, because I think that then becomes its own problem. All I am saying is it's a fascinating take. I think Michael B. Jordan is up to all that would mean. I think he has shown himself to be the kind of guy who could handle that with grace. I think he could handle it with strength. I think he could do it. It is simply, to my mind, and this is all I have to say on the conversation, I think he could do the part. I think he could do it well in all that it entails. It is simply a matter of, does Warner Brothers want to do that?
I think that's fair. And it would be really interesting to see how they weave the origin story. Because basically, and again, I'm not saying that this is a bad thing, but if you make the racial change for Superman, which I'm going to suggest that we do, I have multiple options on my list that are unconventional racial choices. And I don't mean that in a negative light. I mean that in the sense that they're not white and Superman is written exclusively white in the comic books. But obviously, if Warner Brothers has come out and said that Superman's next installment is going to come later on down the line. They're not going to focus on him for a while, which is fine, which means whenever they do resurrect that, then they need to be ready for another origin story because that's just what's going to happen. Because you cannot have – I actually believe Warner Brothers would be missing a massive opportunity to make powerful statements and to change the conversation to something inclusive and powerful and profound if they don't make that racial change and don't provide a origin story that is rooted in the kind of perseverance and hope that could be found in an African-American superhero. So that's going to be part of the conversation as well too. So it's like, if they're going to do that, they're signing on for an origin story, which again isn't a bad thing, but then you maybe have to really worry about placement and timing and stuff like that, because you can have origin story hangover compared to when certain other projects get released. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say the last reason why I didn't pick Michael B. Jordan, and maybe we can get into this as we launch our list, is because I had 3 different eras of Superman I was considering. One was older Superman, one was communist Superman, and one was just the average Boy Scout Superman. Now,
You're
the
going
average
Red Sun on us.
I am going Red Sun because, man, it's about time. Can you not tell me that if it didn't have the right director and the right script, that movie wouldn't be phenomenal?
I'm just
or
really
or Netflix series if it was a Netflix series.
Oh, don't tempt me.
But the big reason is with Boy Scout Superman, the one that's familiar to all of us. Let's look at the two previous examples we had that were worthwhile. Okay, we're ignoring Superman Returns for those of you that are just catching up. Superman, 1978, Christopher Reeve. Up to that point, he has, I think, 3 official IMDb credits on his dossier, none of which really garnered him any attention. He was basically a beautiful specimen who was an unknown and showed that he had chops, and he filled the suit. Henry Cavill, by the time he got cast as Man of Steel, was basically the second leading actor in the show The Tudors that no one watched, and then it got a second life when it was on Netflix for a short period of time. And that was pretty much it. I'm oversimplifying, but what I'm saying is there is something to be said about the recipe of casting someone that doesn't have an already established harrowing reputation or familiar face or mystique or paparazzi type of lore around him into that role, and allowing us to grow our familiarity as with that person as they grow in the suit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's a really good take on it. I think that, so I'm actually going to officially say I'm pro Michael B. Jordan for the role.
100%. I think if they wanted to really reach for the stars and make a splash with a big name and take the bold step that it takes to cast Superman as an African American, I do not think there is a better choice than that.
Yeah, I think that really, like I said, I only left him on. He was going to be on my list until I saw everyone else had him. I think you've given a really good reason, though, why maybe to avoid him as a pick. And I think that's really all I thought is we should address it. We should definitely acknowledge that he's the front runner, at least in the mind of the internet. And I think the internet's had some worse ideas. You know, that's not a bad one. I personally, to go on the record, don't know. I haven't yet seen anything that sounds convincing to me, you know, like anyone with any real credibility saying that this is a thing that might be happening. That doesn't mean it's not. It just means I haven't come across it doing some cursory reading to get ready for this episode. So I'm a bit skeptical that it actually is going to happen, but I'd buy a couple tickets to go see his movie. So there's my take.
100%. I don't think there's a better way to sum up the way we both feel about that. So
yeah.
I think we've done Michael B. Jordan justice, and let's be real, he's one of the more talented, popular, straight up movie stars in the game right now, and he deserves every bit of attention that brings.
And the guy has really gotten built in the last few years and could definitely fill the suit outright. I think he'd look the part.
Completely. All right, Jake, so should we launch into our lists?
Let's do it.
Okay. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
I will go first because you are going to have more exciting picks than me because you've already dropped Red Sun on us. So the thing is, like, you've set a bar that I'm not prepared to jump over. So I'm going to stop trying and let you be the winner tonight. But I am going to go ahead and explain. So you went for different takes on Superman. I actually have the take on Superman I'd really love to see in my head. And
map
so
it out for me.
I was casting.
I'm picturing this. I'm ready.
And it's boring, but it's fun, right? Like I don't mean it's boring. Like it'd be a
farm in Kansas.
I don't think it's boring like it'd be a boring movie, but I don't think it's going to be as thrilling conceptually as yours. I really loved the DC Rebirth in the comics. Happened a couple years ago. DC Rebirth is the moment where DC goes, in the comics anyway, from a series of increasingly poor decisions where every time you thought DC was starting to get it together, they do something weird, right? And it wasn't all bad. You know, there's not that there was nothing good going on in DC, but as a whole publishing line, and it's not to say Marvel was necessarily better, but as a whole publishing line, DC just kind of seemed to not have an identity. And all of a sudden, one day they said DC Rebirth. And it has been, I would argue that the last couple of years of DC Comics rivals. I think the gold standard for artistry in comics right now is Image Comics as a creator-owned place. It's where you go for your indie comics. A lot of people, are doing really bold things. They're thinking outside the box. I would argue that the last 2 years...
We've touched on Image before, and Image is really setting the standard.
Well, I'm going to say the last 2 years of DC, 2 to 3 years, are not quite there, but they are threatening to approach Image level sometimes with the quality of the art, with the quality of the stories being told, with the way that they have taken DC Rebirth both took characters back to basics while moving them forward, which was the real struggle. Is DC had been treating it as an either or thing for a long time. And then one day they just it all clicked under the leadership of Jeff Johns, who's a brilliant writer, and DC just kind of clicked. And it was both. It was, we're moving forward while looking back. And it's just been so perfect in so many ways. And that's not to say there's no misses there, but it's been so good. And the DC Rebirth take on Superman was a character that probably was suffering the most in comics at that point. They tried a few different relaunches. They tried some pretty wacky stuff. They really rebooted the whole DC universe with the New 52. Superman was young and brash and learning. And instead of being identifiable and relatable and all these other things, Superman kind of just became a punk a lot of the time. And it's like, God love him for trying. So many writers kept trying to make him conflicted and relatable and human. And somehow it always managed to come across as, you're a jerk. You're not Superman. I don't love you anymore. It's like, you're not my real dad. Like, there was just none of this, what we love about the character most of the time. And then Rebirth fixed it. And suddenly Superman was an older guy. Not super old, but he was middle-aged. And he was married to Lois Lane, and he had a kid. And Superman was trying to juggle being Superman while being Clark Kent, the father and husband. And it was just such a breath of fresh air on so many levels. And for the first time in probably a decade, Superman consistently felt like the character I knew. And for the first time in probably a decade, Superman also felt like he had a new direction that I had not seen explored at that depth in the character. So this is kind of
the bridge. That's the bridge. It's incredible to like just to think about, because I enjoyed the New 52 just because it was. Even though it had its wacky moments, it was one of those things where it was at least a reboot that was cohesive, and it was one that I could get on track with for a while. And it was kind of a breath at the time. I was like, this is kind of a breath of fresh air. It's like a little more edginess, just a little bit of emo, and exploring some things a little bit more nuanced and a little bit more human and everything. I was like, I can jive with this. And it wasn't euphoric, but it was like, I can jive with this, and I'm riding with this. And it was one of those things where then when Rebirth came along, it was like, I had no idea that this was waiting for me type of thing.
That's exactly right.
It's like you stumbled upon the Holy Grail without realizing you were searching for it.
And it's really, DC has raised the bar so much. And I say this as the Marvel characters, a lot of them are so important to me in my childhood and in my adulthood. But the reality is DC has set the standard and Marvel has yet to quite live up to it. They're starting to catch up now. In this past year, they've made some choices that I don't want to make decisions for how things are going to go long term. It's looking more hopeful than it did. But DC set the bar so much higher. Marvel really didn't know how to get there at the time, just as a whole line, mind you. I'm not saying individual comics. So in my mind, the new take on Superman that I am obsessed with is a fusion of that Rebirth Superman, who is the older guy. He's established. I actually, and we've talked about this before, I'm over origin stories, especially for iconic characters. And I also want to see arguably the best Superman comic ever written, a limited series called All-Star Superman. I want to see that.
Yes. Dude, oh my gosh. I'm so glad. Okay. Yes. Keep going. But I'm really happy.
My Superman that I want to see, right? And clearly Hollywood's not interested necessarily in pleasing me, and that's okay. But if you're asking me, the Superman I want to see is Clark Kent, the father and husband, fused with All-Star Superman. The All-Star Superman is just it's 10. I think it's 10. Is it 12? It's a short series of 10 to 12 issues.
That's a good question.
It just boils down. It distills the character to the most basic and important elements, and you are left with the most pure and joyful. Issues. It's 12 issues. The most purely joyful Superman experience of your reading life. And that's saying something because it's all about him dying.
And it's Grant Morrison's magnum opus as far as just pure comics are concerned.
And Grant Morrison has written some good stuff, guys. So, I mean, so what I want to see is that. So my casting, man, I took a while to get to this. My casting was focused on 3 guys that I thought had the chops, the look, and the age to be that older, wiser, established Superman. Because we've talked before about, I think the ideal use for me of Superman in movies would be maybe make him a background character and bring him out when the threat is so big that you need him. And that's where you get him involved, and let him be that older father figure, big brother to the other superheroes, that maybe he's in the later stages of his career and he's trying to make sure that when it is time for him to hang up the cape, he's leaving behind a generation that can, do the job properly in his absence. And so I picked 3 guys that I thought would fit that. The first one I went with, this is a beloved nerd figure. I love the guy. I think he can do nearly anything. I went Karl Urban.
Whoa.
Okay, right? Because he didn't occur to me until late in the game. If we're being honest, he got Michael B. Jordan's spot on this thing. And Karl Urban, I think he would bring... I think, first of all, he would get the character. Karl Urban's been in some nerdier things. He's, obviously he's Bones in Star Trek. He's been in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, he knows how to live in a world of fandom and cosplay.
Yes,
because
and to do it gracefully.
Thor, Star Trek, Doom, Lord of the Rings, Dread. Like, this is where the guy eats.
Yeah. So I think he's got the credibility with the community. Not that should be a deciding factor, but it's a perk. He's got the credibility with the community. I think that he would. I think you could sit Karl Urban down and say All-Star Superman meets Rebirth Superman, and he'd go, "Oh, cool, yeah, give me a week, I'll put that together." And I think he'd know what we were saying instantly, and he would come at it. And I think every look he gave the camera, every move that he made would communicate that whatever take on Superman he was trying to do. Karl Urban is my first pick.
That's a wonderful pick, and I definitely did not see that coming, but I love it. It only fits in the context that you provided, because just in a vacuum, you say Karl Urban Superman, I would be like, nope. But as I've said before, I don't want to be overly contradictory. There's also something to be said about trusting someone who has not been granted the space to own something in the forefront yet, but knowing that they've got the chops to do it, and that would be his limelight. It's like Karl Urban is, to a lot of people listening to this, Karl Urban is, it's that guy that's in the nerd movies. And when you're cast as Superman, whether it's a primary role or if Superman is a secondary role, it doesn't matter. You're cast as Superman, and your name is going to be a household name after that. And so with that concept of he's middle-aged, he's balancing the work-home life thing to a very intense degree, and he's providing that mentorship to a younger group, like an already established younger Justice League, that sort of thing, I think that is probably right in the wheelhouse.
Yeah, and so good. Okay, because I am very informed by that vision. So heads up, my next 2 picks, they're kind of like that. They're in that line. I'm not going to diverge a lot here. So why don't you excite the people and give them what they really came for, and give us your take on it?
Okay, good deal. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the one that we've mentioned before so we can just get it out of the way, because I loved it when I mentioned it on the podcast. We talked about this, and I've thought about it a lot since then. And the more I think about it, the more I love it. One, because he is low key on my short list of favorite actors, and two, because I just think it is a darn near perfect fit for certain storylines that I think this is exactly the direction they should go if it's available. So I'm just going to revisit for a few minutes Viggo Mortensen as middle-aged, slightly older than middle-aged Superman. I really wanted that era of Superman represented on my list, and I tried, and I just couldn't come up with someone who I thought was going to be a better choice than that one. So I'm like, okay, I'm riding the Viggo train still, because the guy can do darn near anything.
Yes.
Because here's the thing. This portion of Superman is going to be largely unfamiliar to the casual fan, to the people that say, I need to know what Superman's up to have a conversation, but I don't need to follow him closely to call myself a fan. Like the Kingdom Come, the Rebirth Superman, those sorts of things are going to be very new to a lot of people. Viggo knows how to take unconventional and diverse and outside of the box choices and turn them into something that is worth watching, even if you don't get the story. He either has movies where his performance is so good that you don't care that the movie was mediocre, or he has films where every single aspect of it was brilliant and he held the thing together. And I think he's one of the best working actors today. It's just he's really easily overlooked because he's Viggo and he makes very odd choices. And I picture him.
It's Viggo.
It's Viggo. I picture him with that salt and pepper hair and that kind of heavily dented brow and the textured parts of his face and the kind of gravelly, raspiest voice that he gets when he's being really intense but quiet at the same time. And I just think like that's a level of Superman that I think would really play well on screen if they took the right story and put together a decent script. So I want to see Viggo in that part.
Do you have a specific story in mind to adapt or to at least draw inspiration from? Or are you just thinking that version?
That version is fine, but Kingdom Come is at the top of my list because I have a fierce love for that comic, and also just for Alex Ross and everything. Yeah. There's a lot. Kingdom Come is a seminal title for me, and when I think of Viggo, I'm like, yeah, he can do it. Just throw him in the suit and he'll make it happen because he's Viggo. But if you're asking me specifically, it's Viggo Mortensen in a screen or Netflix series adaptation of Kingdom Come.
Yeah, I think and we talked about that before, so I'm not going to run into the ground, but I think you're spot on with that. I think Viggo is a great pick. I actually, when I was putting my list together, I kept going like, why do I keep thinking Viggo Mortensen would be really good as an older Superman? And then it took me like probably a day or so. And I was like, crap, because Mitch said that in an episode.
I planted the seed. See, this is how a revolution starts, man. This is how it starts.
Or it's how somebody loses their job as a podcaster because they can't remember their own freaking material.
That too. So you're on thin ice, buddy.
I am. That's strike one right there. We know that's not strike one. No, I love the Viggo pick. My second pick, if you're ready for it.
I'm ready. Do it.
My second pick is a little bit more, I want to say, man, I don't mean this to be derivative or not derivative, to be, to be insulting. Derogatory. Thank you, smart one. You're the smart one in the team is what I meant there. Not that, man, I am batting a 0 tonight. I didn't mean the way that 13-year-old girls say smart one.
Don't worry, Jake. You're pretty.
That's what I'm here for. I got a face for podcasting. And I'm going to butcher the man's name, and I literally have been clicking the play button on how to pronounce his name for a while. But I think he'd be kind of a popcorn pick. And I don't even mean that in a bad way, derogatorily. But David Boreanaz is... He's been Angel on the Buffy show, which I didn't really watch, but I'm aware of. He was Seeley Booth on Bones, which I have watched a lot of with my wife. And he's kind of this like square-jawed all-American guy who's been doing television for years and years. And he's actually been rumored to be getting the part of Superman at least once or twice in his career. And he keeps kind of like coming up right against the role and then not getting it. And I think that I can't say this with authority because I've not seen him do much beyond just kind of your primetime TV procedural stuff. But I get the feeling that the guy's got some depth to him. I've seen him take some of those, like, on a very special episode of Bones. And I've seen him inject, a different level of emotion into it. And I think that he can do, that drama comedy mix fairly well that I think might lighten things, because I get the feeling that DC is going to run to not DC, Warner Brothers again. I get the feeling Warner Brothers is going to run to the opposite extreme and try to make the next generation of DC films a little funnier. And maybe they go too far with it. Maybe they get it right. But I think he could carry that. I think the guy's come close to the role more than once, and I think that he could do it justice. I'd like to see him get his shot. So I'm not necessarily saying that's my guy. I'm saying let's give him a shot because I think he can carry it.
Can I veto and just say no?
Yeah, you're more than welcome to.
I'm not a fan of that pick, and maybe I just need to eat my own words and say give the guy a shot. He can prove it. But man, the level of melodrama and camp, I'm not ready for that kind of Superman.
See, and that I'm not either. To be clear, I'm not advocating for a CW take on the character. I do think he's got it in him to do more than that. But again, I've not seen him in anything quite like that, so I could be wrong.
So here's the question, and maybe this comes back to a little bit of the larger conversation we had earlier. Does the reputation and or the baggage, whichever term you want to use, does the reputation or baggage that he brings, because he's been an identifiable face for a long time, especially in geekery fandom, with Buffy and Angel alone, does the reputation and baggage that he bring to the movie and to the role of Superman overshadow his potential to rebrand himself as someone that could do this?
I think that's a really good question. And I think that it's a hard one for me to answer because I can't think of an example off the top of my head that says yay or nay. So I don't know that I can speak because, like you said, a lot of the people we've put in this role as Superman have been coming in and it's really been their defining moment. We haven't put a lot of actors in that are already, for lack of a better term, well established. I think that one of the downsides to casting him would be that you'd be you kind of are, and maybe I'm not giving a creative team enough credit, but in some ways you're probably painting yourself into a corner because you are bringing a certain expectation in. And I think that you are getting, like I said, a little bit more of a popcorn take on the character, which again isn't necessarily a terrible thing. I think that the people who really want him in this role are largely people that want to see somebody do something along the lines of Christopher Reeve. And Christopher Reeve that is in no way, listen, I don't have the stones to say anything negative about Christopher Reeve because his Superman is the definitive one that everybody's, they're either going away from it or coming back towards it, but he's the true north everybody's trying to identify with. I think that the people who really want Boreanaz in the role are the people that would like to see someone kind of bring it back to the Christopher Reeve interpretation. And I'm not saying you have to go that route if you cast him, but I think you are setting yourself up with a certain expectation the second you make that casting announcement.
That's fair. I understand how you reach that conclusion. I'm not a big fan of the pick, but that's fine. It's boring if we agree on everything.
Yeah, it is. I'm kind of excited because I feel like I think we've accidentally agreed more than we intended to when we set out on this podcast. And I'm sort of excited to finally pick something that you don't like.
Yeah, rock on. So here I am to tell you, no, Angel, cut off his wings and sit him down.
Well, and you can hear how vehemently I defended my pick there. So, I mean, clearly I'm very invested in it.
Maybe he's right. I don't know. Okay, so I'm gonna save my I'm gonna back clean up at the end and save my big one for the third spot. So my next pick was kind of, maybe this is cheating, but it's our podcast, so whatever. It was kind of an amalgamation of three. Basically, it was, if I was going to go the Boy Scout Superman route, if I was going to take a relatively fresh face and say, this is your moment, deliver and become a household name type of thing, this would be the one. Mm-hmm. So I had three names on this one, and I eventually landed on one, but I'll give you the two that I cut. One was Matt McGorry, who was the prison guard in the first couple seasons of Orange is the New Black that had an amputated leg. I can't remember his character's name, but I know who you're talking about. The one, the baby daddy. The baby daddy. Yeah. Yep. So he played John Bennett.
That's it. Yep.
Security guard John Bennett in a couple seasons of Orange is the New Black. He just kind of has that Christopher Reeve look, but also in that show, he showed that he had the chops to bring emotional nuance to things, whether it was funny or serious. So I was like, he probably could do it, but he took a backseat then to Glenn Powell, who I think would be a very conventional choice, especially given where his career is going. He played John Glenn in Hidden Figures. He was in Expendables 3 as a small character, and he's just been he was in Set It Up, which is a really popular new rom-com on Netflix, and then he's just been cast as Maverick in the Top Gun new Top Gun movie that's coming out in a couple years. So it's like, he seemed like a conventional pick, but then I bumped him off too for this guy, Lance Gross. So if you don't follow the Sleepy Hollow TV show or Tyler Perry stuff or a couple of episodes of Grey's Anatomy, you're not going to know who Lance Gross is. But if you IMDb him, you're going to look at him instantly and say, if we were going to cast an African-American man in the suit of Superman, but have him be a relatively fresh face that we would grow with, that we would grow to love without already having preconceived notions for, this guy is it. He has the look. I've seen him in his episodes of Grey's Anatomy. I've seen him in a couple of other small things. It looks like he's got some depth. He may be directable. And this is me saying, okay, let's get our third person out. We had our Christopher Reeve. We had our Henry Cavill. We put them in front of everybody and said, he's our guy. And they delivered. Lance Gross, I'm taking a chance on you. You can carry the new racial equality flag here and bring the African American origin story and don the tights and the cape, buddy.
I like this pick based on just pictures, because you managed to name, it's like with your citing of what he's been in, it's like you weaved in and out of things that I've seen and managed to hit the points that I haven't. Because I did not catch Sleepy Hollow. Grey's Anatomy, I never really caught on with. And I'm looking at some of. To be fair,
Grey's isn't great, but it's one of the few shows the wife and I can agree on to watch together because we don't like any of the same things. But Grey's is passable.
Grey's Anatomy is the show my wife watches. She's probably on it right now while I'm in here. It's the show she watches and I'm always like, you can watch it. I'd be happy to read a book or something, but yeah, it never really clicked with me. I would be terrified to be brought to that hospital because it really just seems like everybody there dies, especially the doctors.
Everybody dies.
Yeah. And I don't know.
Dude, no one's safe in Shondaland. That's just the way it is. I've seen Scandal. I know how this goes down.
Well, it's kind of like buying your shirts from a guy who's always got his shirts ripped. Like if you go to that hospital, you're like, wait, you can't keep the doctors alive? I don't want to be here. I don't trust them. I'm looking at his pictures and I'm seeing everything that you're seeing. And I think that it's a great pick aesthetically, and I'm going to trust you and your assessment of his acting abilities that the guy could carry the role. I think that's a really good pick. Like I said, just visually, and I'd go see his movie. Yeah.
Boom, there it is. That's me attempting to follow the formula of finding an unknown and make something happen when we don't know who Hollywood execs thinks are unknown that deserve to be in the thing. So it's like, boom, that's kind of like picking an upset in March Madness and hoping that it's like, you have to have upsets in your bracket, but you don't know which ones it's going to beat. So it's just a gamble. I think Lance has it in him, and he's definitely got the look. So if he ever got the shot, I'd see it.
The thing about casting unknowns for Superman is that I don't know how to say this without sounding derogatory, but I swear I don't mean it this way. There's kind of a low bar on Superman because there's a certain extent to which I think we as a culture would just accept a guy who looks like he could fill out the suit, and we wouldn't necessarily care about the acting. Now, there's another element of us that will always care about the acting. And so, but I think that Superman is a character where that for so many people don't follow comics. They don't care about comic book movies, but they know Superman. Like my mother really knows Superman. She knows who Lex Luthor is. She knows who Superman is. And my mom is really not current on those things, shall we say. And she's not really in this culture in any way. And so I say that to say there's a lot of people out there like my mom that they're just going to be like, oh yeah, he looks like Superman. He's a great Superman. And so the bar is kind of low in some ways. In other ways, the bar is so ridiculously high because it is a character that so many people will just accept on visuals alone that the challenge of being a great Superman, it would be so enticing. So I don't know how that plays into what you were just saying about Lance Gross.
Can I go film nerd here for just a quick minute?
Please, yes, yeah.
So a couple of examples that I keep thinking about on both sides of this as far as the Superman formula is concerned is like, okay, we talked about Henry and we talked about Christopher and how they were unknowns and they became these icons because of the role and because they had the chops, but we also didn't have any preconceived notions about that. I come back to two movies specifically that are completely unrelated, Amadeus and Rocky.
Or as we call it, My Home Thursday Night.
That's right. It's a good double feature. Those are two of my all-time favorite movies, and they also both won Best Picture. And if you research these movies at all, it's really not hard to find that there was massive controversy and now mythic lore because they were such successes over the casting. The studio execs for Amadeus really wanted to cast Dustin Hoffman as Salieri, and Milos Forman was convinced we needed to cast an unknown because by the time that movie was released, Dustin Hoffman had a career of over a decade and already had his first Oscar in his case. And so it was like he's got this familiar face and he's bringing this reputation, and Milos really wanted this concept. It was like, this is potentially one of the greatest written characters in theater and cinema, and we need to give whoever's playing him the playground to do it burden free. And so they cast in Hollywood terms, relatively unknown in Antonio Salieri, and he won the Oscar for a movie that won Best Picture. And they cast Tom Hulce opposite of him, who was mainly a theater actor and was in the movie Animal House, and that was about it. So it's like these unconventional choices are actually what made it work. And it's the same thing with Rocky. Sly Stallone wrote the script and everybody wanted to buy it. And then as soon as he said, but I want to star in it too, he had only done like one movie prior to that. It was Paradise Alley, and nobody saw it. And nobody wanted him to be in it. So everyone kept saying, no, we're either not going to do it, or if we do it, we're going to decrease your fee by a great deal because we think the movie's going to bomb without a familiar face. And they kept saying they wanted someone like Burt Reynolds in it. Well, it's freaking Rocky. Like, I don't need to remind you, like, Rocky, right? And then I think about when we did our Batman episode a couple weeks ago, and I think about Christian Bale's Batman. Bale came in to this already a very familiar star, very popular, and had already done some really big movies up to this point. And we both agreed that though the Nolan Batman films are up there with the best, if not the best incarnations of the Batman stories, he is not anywhere close to the top of the list of the Batman performances. And I wonder if part of that is because it's like, oh, it's Christian Bale, and we're forcing ourselves to watch Christian Bale do this instead of just watching somebody be Batman. That was a really long tangent that may not have made any sense.
No, it made a lot of sense. And I think that I think that we're going to look back in a week or two and think that might have been a high point of this episode, just because I've never heard anyone give like an actual film theory, like an argument in favor of casting an unknown that had some sort of like, theory behind it and some academic or intellectual thought. Usually it's just like, I don't want to see him as Batman. And I thought that, so I think you really nailed it there. There's a lot to be said for bringing in an unknown person, which is going to make my next pick really crappy.
You picked Nicolas Cage, didn't you, you jerk?
No, I didn't. I swore I wouldn't. I'm going to say on that note, though, I wanted to find a reason to. I am so fascinated by Nicolas Cage. And I know I've asked this before. Did you watch Community?
I haven't seen Community.
There's an entire episode where the B plot to the whole episode is dedicated to answering the question of, is Nicolas Cage a good actor or a bad actor? And like one of the show's main characters has a breakdown because he can't solve it, and it has like a mental.
That might be the story of our times.
It really is. Listen, it's so, man. I mean, just anyone out there, and this includes you, Mitch, that hasn't watched Community yet, you owe it to yourself, even to power through the really weird 6th season. Because in that 6th season, you can see the seeds of Rick and Morty being planted, if you're a fan of that. But I really am fascinated by Nicolas Cage, and sometimes that fascination is an admiration, and other times that fascination is a morbid curiosity.
He, all things aside, with the Tim Burton movie that was laid to rest before it was ever birthed, he is known for having a very impressive comic book collection, and I believe that at one point was one of the few owners of an actual Superman #1.
Well, and he, anytime somebody wants to say Nicolas Cage is a bad actor, I'm always like, yeah, but Raising Arizona, and so like the guy, anyway, I wanted so,
or The Rock, because come on, if you didn't like The Rock, you're a witch.
I haven't seen The Rock.
Dude, it's before Michael Bay got really crazy and was just making good Bruckheimer movies.
I hear so much good about it. I swear I'm going to get there one day.
It's both one you take serious. It's like that perfect middle of like, you don't take it seriously, but you also take it seriously, and you find yourself at odds the entire time on which one you should be. And then by the time the movie's over, you're like, doesn't matter. I loved it.
Yeah, man, I love movies like, okay, so I'm going to go see The Rock. I wanted so badly to find an excuse to put Nicolas Cage in here, but I just couldn't. My last pick for my Papa Superman is one of my very favorite actors working right now for
John
nearly
Goodman.
anything. No, but man, love me some John Goodman. This guy can do anything, and I think you can look at his. I think you can look at his IMDb page and see, oh, holy crap, he's been in everything and he's been good at it. John Hamm is
okay. This is so interesting because I've had this conversation before with my mom actually a couple of years ago about how I could see him being a salt and pepper Superman, and then I think it was just at the end of last week with Ben Affleck going into rehab again recently that John Hamm came out and said that he wanted to play Batman. Yeah,
and I like that. I like that too. Here's the thing, I like John Hamm for every role, right? Like. I don't care what role you want to put him in. Yeah, like I love the guy. I think he's so talented. I think he can do anything because you look at it's like, all right, let's see. I'm going to redefine the cable drama with Mad Men. I'm going to do some Disney movie. I'm going to hop in here on Baby Driver. How about a cameo on Parks and Rec? I'm going to have
Bridesmaids too. He's in the first scene of Bridesmaids.
Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. He's so versatile, and the guy is totally willing to throw himself into anything and be great at it. I mean, you tell me what role you want, and I'll put him in it. I think that he and that's really all I guess I didn't even mean to, but I just gave my endorsement for him. I just think the guy, like, I think he's so good at everything. He's a very versatile talent. He's a very unique talent. And I think that for the take on Superman that I'm looking for, I don't think you could do much better than John Hamm in that role. All that being said, yeah, like you mentioned, he's expressed interest in the Batman role. I'd love that as well. I think that his take on Bruce Wayne could be phenomenal. I think that he could give you...
He would be the best Bruce Wayne for sure.
Oh man!
Sure.
Well, and here's the thing with John Hamm, and I think this is why I want to see him in a superhero something, because I think that there's so many actors that we say, oh yeah, he did great as Clark Kent, but I didn't love his Superman. I liked his Bruce Wayne, I didn't love his Batman, or vice versa. I think John Hamm's versatility really makes him. I think he would be phenomenal at playing a character with a duality there, like a superhero. And while many, many superhero projects these days have gotten away from the secret identity, and I think that's been a wise choice for the most part, especially since Iron Man, they've largely abandoned that trope in a lot of superhero stories. I think if you want to go back to the secret identity and you want to go back to the story of somebody juggling two lives, I think John Hamm could give you that character, and especially in Superman, who, you know, Batman has kind of become the standard for a secret identity because there's that old, really fascinating, but you know, it's now the standard take on Batman, where Batman's the real guy and Bruce Wayne is the mask that he wears so he can be Batman. Whereas Superman is the reverse of that, where Superman is the costume that Clark Kent puts on to be able to help people, but he's Clark Kent, you know, he's the farm boy from Smallville is who he really is at his core. And Superman is the identity he wears so that he can go out and help people. And I think that John Hamm could really juggle that thing where like Superman is, you know, he's going to be trying to be, now obviously he's going to be more established in this take I'm advocating, and he's going to have some confidence to him, but also he's going to be in new territory. He's going to be figuring out, how do I be a husband and a father and be Superman? You know, is there room for Clark Kent and all of that? And I think it's a very human approach that I'm advocating. And I think that John Hamm could give us a unified approach that still feels different, but quality in all those different angles on it.
I will meet you and say that if we are going to go with a low-hanging fruit option and go with somebody that's so easily identifiable, but not go with Michael B. Jordan because he's already been listed at the front of the pack. If we're going for the others, then I would say John Hamm is probably the best pick. Like in my head, when I was kind of batting around, like, well, who would be the obvious choices? And I really did think about John Hamm for a bit and Michael Fassbender, you know, because it's like those guys are just those guys. But can I just say one definitively hot take about John Hamm that doesn't have any bearing on what we do on this podcast?
Yeah.
Can I just go ahead and say that to date, his portrayal as Don Draper / Dick Whitman is the greatest leading man dramatic performance in television of the 21st century. And yes, I recognize that puts him ahead of Bryan Cranston and James Gandolfini. Okay,
so this is where I'm going to really look bad. This is going to be my worst episode ever. I can't get through Mad Men. And by that, I mean I can't get through the first 2 episodes. They put me to sleep.
All right. Have you seen the movie The Legends of the Fall?
No. See, I'm failing everywhere tonight.
Okay, so I was going to quote this bit where in Legends of the Fall, he goes, "We are no longer brothers," and then he spits. Boom.
I've actually been thinking lately about taking another run at it, because it's one of those things where there's some things that I am happy to admit that I'm the one who's wrong. And Mad Men is one of those things that, like, as much as I've read about it, heard about it, as wide as its impact has been, I know I'm the one who's wrong. I am not telling anyone Mad Men's not a great show. I just advertising in the 60s, like you give me that elevator pitch and it puts me to sleep. And I know it's about more than that. I get it. Nobody has to defend it to me. Stay off my Twitter with this, guys. I just can't get through those first few episodes, and I know one day I'll press through and enjoy it. But
2 quick questions.
Yes.
Tell me your wife has seen it, right? Because this definitely
she loves it. She tells me I'm an idiot every time this comes up.
Okay. See, that's very on brand, and I'm grateful that she is doing that. So good deal. Did you enjoy Breaking Bad? You've made it through all of Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah. I liked Breaking Bad a lot.
Okay. So if you can get through the first 2.5 seasons of Breaking Bad, you can get through Mad Men, because you have to be honest, as much as we all love Breaking Bad, it was a long, long payoff to get to that end point of the second season, early third season, to be all like, oh, okay. Yeah. Let's do this for sure. If you can get through the long lead in with Breaking Bad, you can get through Mad Men.
Okay. All right. I'll give it another shot.
Okay, cool. Welcome to my TED Talk.
So, so you said Red Sun earlier, and then
I did.
That was probably a good 45 minutes ago now, and you've left me here hanging. Talk to me about Red Sun. Talk to me about who's playing that version, because that's what you've got left, right?
Yes, that is what I've got left. We're doing Superman Red Sun. And for those of you that are familiar with this, then I assume that you share in my excitement of this needs to come to screen in the right way, because holy crap, is that story amazing. And it's also one of the best selling runs of Superman in the history of his dossier. 2, if you're not familiar with Superman Red Sun, quick little bridge. It basically takes the origin story of Superman, but says what would happen if his spaceship that went from Krypton and landed on Earth landed in the middle of Soviet Russia instead of the United States. And it is powerful and incredible and visceral. And I'm going to be a contradictory voice here and go against my casting an unknown and just swing for the fences and say, if we're going to put Red Sun on the big screen, then we need to get somebody that has the chops to do it. So Jake, are you ready? Because I'm really proud of this.
Tell me about Nicolas Cage in Red Sun.
So the Nicolas Cage Michael Bay version of Red Sun looks like this. Okay. I have cast as Superman in the Red Sun incarnation, Oscar Isaac.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right? Is that not perfect?
That's really good. You win tonight, and I knew you would, but like anyone who listens to this show knew you were going to win tonight. But yeah, that's a good one.
So Oscar Isaac, I mean, I'm assuming everyone's familiar with him at least something, but the guy is what you said about the versatility of John Hamm. We could equally say about Oscar Isaac, if not more so. I have not seen him give a bad performance, even when he's in a bad movie like Suburbicon. He was phenomenal in it, and he can do anything he sets his mind to, and he already has. Like, he's done everything, like Ex Machina, Inside Llewyn Davis, A Most Violent Year, all these different things, and it's phenomenal what he is able to bring to screen, and he is just a perfect fit for a bold re-envisioning of a dark, twisted, and somewhat uncomfortable version of the Superman story.
I have a very emotional attachment to Oscar Isaac that I don't normally develop with celebrities. I saw Inside Llewyn Davis with my wife at a time where there was just it hit me where I was in a way that once in a while art and life intersect, and the timing is just right. And the timing on seeing Inside Llewyn Davis, it hit me where I was with some stuff going on. And it just, the movie devastated me in a really good way, to the point where I saw it in the theater once. I went home, bought the soundtrack to listen to the music. When the film came out, I bought the Blu-ray, and I haven't watched it yet because I don't have the emotional strength to watch it a second time yet, but one day I'm going to get around to it. Since then, I have had this really deep emotional connection to Oscar Isaac where, and everything you said is true, and everything you said is exactly right about how talented he is. I'm not capable of being objective about him. I love him too much. And I think that's such a good pick for him as Soviet Superman.
Inside Llewyn Davis, by the way, is almost a perfect movie. Like it's that good. Gosh, it's so good.
It's up there. I mean, the Coen brothers have had such a career, and it's up there as a contender for their best. Like, I didn't come ready for that fight tonight, so I don't know that I'm going to say it's their best, but it's got to be considered.
It's for sure in my top 5, if not my top 4, top 3. It's I can definitively say top 5, but it's phenomenal.
So
but
good.
I think Oscar Isaac brings he brings the heavyweight chops to the arena with this type of interpretation of Superman, while still bringing the ability to find something fresh and nuanced and versatile at the same time. And I feel like he would be able to ride that line of be like, okay, this is a really, if they're going to spend $200 million to put Superman Red Son on screen and risk the backlash of the Make America Great Again followers of hate Superman for a little bit until they actually see the movie. Like, they need somebody with gravitas to handle that mantle. And he could do that while still being able to find something new to bring to the role. I 100% believe it. And man, I think he would look good in the suit. I think he would.
I mean, it's tough to argue that. He would, man, he'd be so good. And Red Son, man, Red Son is so good. I would say Red Son, what do you think? Best thing Mark Miller wrote?
Oh, gosh.
I know. I just dropped a bomb.
Yes,
but
maybe. Yeah, I did it to you, though. You almost had to pick your favorite Coen Brothers movie on a whim, too. So it's like, yeah, it's up there, man. It could be, because Red Son is seminal. I mean, it is just straight up it is a pillar.
Mark Miller is a guy that I'm very hot and cold with. Like, everything he's done, I either think is awesome or I just don't care for. And I think he's very talented. He's very much one or the other for me. I think I would probably say Red Son is probably the best thing he's done. I mean, I don't know. He's done some pretty big stuff, but I'd go with that.
I mean, Red Son was executed beautifully, but also there's just something. Every once in a while, there's just an idea that comes along that is just so amazing that the idea itself trumps a lot of its counterpoints, and that doesn't even touch on the execution itself. And conceptually, everything behind Red Son is just, I think, like once in a generation brilliant. To say, what if I took one of the most apple pie and fireworks identifiable best things about America and said, what if I dropped it into Soviet Russia instead and do it in a way that was poetic?
Well, and the work, Red Son is subversive in the right way. And so sometimes, and this is my issue with some of Mark Miller's work, is that sometimes his stuff becomes subversive in the sense that it's just trying to be, I don't want to say offensive, but it's just it's trying to see how much it can shock you sometimes, some of his work. And there's a place for that, certainly. And I'm not saying that makes it bad. It's just not for me. And I feel like, a classic example of a swing and a miss from Mark Miller is the Civil War comic that is such a brilliant idea that then in the execution, it just kind of falls apart under the weight of being a major crossover. But I will definitely say that Red Son is one of those ones where he nailed it. And I think part of why I think it might be his best work is because it's so subversive in the right way. And so it becomes this perfect moment for him where he's edgy, he is countercultural, he's twisting around something that we think we understand, and he's putting a new spin on it, but he's doing it in that way that it never feels like it's spectacle for its own sake, but there is an element of spectacle to it. I really like Red Son. I think that would be, I guess here's my question, and I'm going to be the jerk here and ask you, how do you think then a Red Son film fits into the rebooted or soft rebooted DCEU they're talking about? Or do you think it should be like this upcoming Joker film and be just an Elseworld story where they're kind of telling a story that's not necessarily in the main continuity?
Man, can I just be a cop out and do something and not even choose what you presented me? And say
absolutely.
Can I just say option C and make it an HBO series? If this Watchmen series doesn't suck and we like it and that's a good model, then let's just do that.
That's interesting. So that's a good, well, because there's so much in the world of Red Sun, because like they start going into like Batman's the freedom fighter, right? And there's all these new takes on familiar DC characters that there's definitely a mythology to Red Sun that could be expanded on very thoroughly to create. And the other thing is Mark Miller loves turning his stuff into movies. And
yeah, he definitely likes that paycheck. I think
he'd be happy to help. I know.
So I wonder if it could just be a limited series. If it was 4 like 90-minute episodes or 4 60-minute episodes or something like that, I think there would be room for it to expand just a touch and make it feel a little bit more lived in, but then still pay attention to everything that is in the book itself. I mean, if it was going to be in a movie, then it would have to be the Todd Phillips route. Like, just make it a standalone, fork over the money it takes to put together the production design and get the right people to run it and just do the thing. Like, go get Denis Villeneuve to make the movie, which would be actually perfect. So give me Denis Villeneuve doing that on his own, and don't do anything before it. Don't do anything after it, and leave him alone and just let him give us a masterpiece, or give us the HBO 4-episode limited series and do it right. I'd say I'd be happy with either one of those options.
I think that's fair. I think that's a fair take. And you mentioned it earlier. Also, so now go ahead.
Well, I should say that Villeneuve is like a cop-out for me because he's my favorite director not named Paul Thomas Anderson. So it's kind of like, gee, Mitch, you really swung for the fences there. You cast your favorite director in that one. Good work.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that it speaks to how much potential that project had. Like, of all the crazy things we've suggested on this podcast, a Red Sun HBO limited series starring Oscar Isaac is probably both the craziest and the one with the highest ceiling. And
for sure,
done correctly, man, that could be good. That could be really good.
And I think, I mean, I'm really enjoying the idea of Denis Villeneuve doing this movie because I worship at his altar. If you're not familiar with Denis Villeneuve, go see Arrival, Prisoners, Enemy, and Blade Runner 2049, and then come back and talk to me. But
all very good.
It's just the guy is just untouchable. I feel like the HBO model may be the best because it's probably the easiest way for that to live by itself. Does that make sense? It's like the minute you give it over to HBO and it gets the 4-episode limited series treatment, that instantly everyone just categorizes that differently. And we don't feel like we have to lump it in even conversationally with this other stuff. This Todd Phillips Joker movie is going to be, whether it's good or bad, is going to be lumped into DCEU conversations, even though it's a standalone. That's just what's going to happen. But if it's living in this HBO island, it almost just belongs by itself. And that may be the best thing for it because Red Sun is a standalone and it surely doesn't need to be tainted by anything else.
Can I say, to go just a little bit adjacent to that I have been so skeptical of this idea of a Joker film because I am among – how do we keep coming back to Alan Moore every week? All right, I'll get the tattoo on my arm. I am in that camp that believes Alan Moore nailed it with The Killing Joke as far as the idea that the Joker shouldn't have a definitive origin. And so I have been so critical of this idea of a Joker origin film as just a who the heck asked for it thing. And I don't know what it was about that picture of Joaquin Phoenix as the guy who will become the Joker that they released the other day. And maybe what I did is I contrasted it with Jared Leto's Joker and that first picture of him with all the tattoos and the crazy grill and my visceral at it. But when I saw that picture of him as the man who will be Joker, I think his name's Arthur, I was just like, I'm going to go see this and I'm going to like it, aren't I? So
that's the thing. I was actually texting my brother about this last night because my brother is the biggest single Batman fan I know of both comics and movies. And we're talking about how we both feel like we didn't ask for it, we don't need it, and we certainly don't need an origin story for the Joker. And if they're going to butcher it, it's going to be even worse. We're just kind of in that camp. But then at the same time, it's like Joaquin Phoenix, you can make the case that he's the best working actor today, and he should have 2 Oscars already. He's been robbed twice for Gladiator and The Master. And it's just, I know I'm going to see it. And even if the movie sucks, I'm probably going to like his performance, but the movie may not suck because Todd Phillips is pretty good. And so it's frustrating because we don't need it. We didn't ask for it, yet here we are. And yeah, heavy sigh. I probably am going to like it.
How frustrating is it going to be in a good way? How frustrating is it going to be if that ends up being like the best Batman film we've gotten in a decade?
The best Batman film, and it's just Batman adjacent.
Right. Well, it's the most like, and I know that we're talking about superheroes, so isn't it all like who asked for this? But it's the most, no project has ever made me more just be like, who wanted this? Who said make that? And yet as more and more little details eke out, I keep just like sighing heavily and going, that's going to be pretty good, I bet.
It's catnip, man. It's catnip.
Yeah, and they're just slowly drawing me in. Or like, darn it, this is going to be good.
It's like that episode of Seinfeld where Elaine bets with Jerry that she can actually stay broken up with Putty. And so the rule is anytime she gets back together with Putty that she has to fork over a whole bunch of cash to him. And there's just this montage of every time Elaine and Putty hook up. It's like Elaine and Putty hook up, and then the next shot is her handing cash over to Jerry. And it's like a 30-second montage where it happens like a dozen times. This is what it is. It's like, I don't want it. I don't want it. Okay, fine. Take my money.
That's exactly right.
That's how I feel. That's it. And then the next round of photos and leaked footage will come out, and then we'll feel the same way because it'll be like 6-8 weeks before we see anything else. So we'll kind of settle back into our curmudgeon where we're like, yeah, but everyone's talking about it. We haven't seen anything yet. No one wants this anyway. Dum dum dum. And then so it's the first look of him in the makeup. Yeah, I like it. Okay, fine.
That's exactly right.
Oh man, we covered a lot of ground, Jake.
Yeah, this became a much bigger episode than I anticipated.
Superman, man, he has that effect.
Yeah, and I feel that we have, for anyone who still doubted it, definitely settled that you are the Superman expert in this pairing here. And I think that, man, you had some good picks in there.
I think we both did well. We can brush our shoulders off, but yeah, I think putting Oscar Isaac's Red Son at the top of the list, I think is probably a good decision because I sure as heck want to see that.
Yeah, I would go see that movie.
Major shout out, as always, to the Geek Dad Podcast Network for allowing us to call that place home. It's a lovely, cozy home, and we love being a part of those wonderful geeks that know a whole lot of really cool stuff and know how to make people happy. So thank you, Geek Dad. You're cool.
Thanks.
Hit us up on Twitter at WatchComicsPod. That's comics with an X. At WatchComicsPod. We want to hear your takes. Who would you cast as Superman? What did you like about our takes? What did you not like? Yell at Jake for all sorts of stuff that he said because that's what Twitter is for. And we'll be back at you next week with some more fresh stuff.
Can't wait.
This podcast has been a production of the Geek Dad Podcast Network. If you've enjoyed this content, please consider supporting us at patreon.com/geekdad.